Recording in progress. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Frontline Conference. My name's Tim Bissett. I am the director of the St Martin in the Fields charity, and I look after the Frontline network as well. We've got a really great crowd of people joining us for, I think, is going to be a informative, busy, and I hope engaging day as well. Our theme this year is overcoming barriers. It's come from listening to frontline workers and hearing what people would find useful and what they'd like to talk about today. So everything that you hear and see today has come from our conversation with frontline workers and the things that they want. Now, we know that it's been an exceptionally challenging and tough year for everybody, and we've been amazed at people being absolutely brilliant and keeping going through what seems like a never-ending pandemic. We think the end's here, and then sometimes it just slips a little bit further ahead. But what we want to do today is offer an event that can focus on creative, on innovative practice, what people are doing on the ground, to highlight how people across all 4 nations are working to overcome barriers and ultimately get people into accommodation. I'm really sorry that we can't be together in person. Some of you may have attended our conferences in the past. We're actually here as a team at Conway Hall. We've used that as a conference venue in the past, and it's kind of nice that there's at least a few of us together here in a place that we brought people together in the past. And you'll know that we usually have kind of sweeties on the tables, and we make these events as much fun as we can. Who can forget the snowball fight with Taylor Swift in the background of a few years ago? It was kind of good, and I think we're missing doing things like that, and one day we'll be able to do it again. So today, circumstances dictate that we need to take a slightly different approach. As much as we did want to bring people together in the rooms, we couldn't do that, but we've got a lot of material using this kind of online format. What I'm also going to do as well is provide a little bit of feedback on our frontline network and what we've been doing. And I'm thrilled that we've got Dame Louise Casey with us, and she's going to join and speak to us in a few minutes from now. And we're going to have some time for some questions, and we hope that people will provide questions which we'll be able to put to Louise. We've tried to pace ourselves during the day, so we've got breaks for lunch, we've got breaks during the morning, so feel free to pop in, pop out as much as you like. Yeah, there'll be no noisy crisps and things. I hope you'll be able to concentrate on the things that you'd like to concentrate and dip in and out where that feels appropriate. Our speakers are coming from all 4 nations across the UK. This morning, we've got sessions on universal credit, on evidence and complex needs, accessing healthcare, all in for change, and responding effectively through specialist effective interventions. Some terrific sessions that we've got today. After lunch, we've got a range of sessions focused on well-being, sessions around crisis management, understanding and responding to compassion fatigue, communication, conflict resolution, and identifying and overcoming unconscious bias at work. And then finally, right at the end of the day, we have got a panel session with 4 speakers coming from all 4 nations, and you'll be able to put some questions to those folk. The panel includes Ewan Aitken from Cyrenians up in Edinburgh, Kate Dalton from Cymorth in Cymru, from Nicola McCrudden from the Council for the Homeless in Northern Ireland, and Rick Henderson from Homeless Link, who will be joining us. So again, start to think of some questions and things that you might want to put to those people. So I really hope you enjoy the day. I hope you take away a lot of useful information, that you go away energized and inspired, and also you're reminded to keep in contact with us as a network. If you've not joined Frontline Network, we'll pop a link in the chat that enables you to do that. Please do. It's worth spending a few minutes just signing up, so you know what we're doing, what's on offer, and things that you can get involved with. So let's start by just trying something that, if I have to admit, I'm slightly anxious about, but the team tell me it's going to work fine. Little icebreaker just to find out who we've got in the conference today. The way that you do this is you go to menti.com, menti.com. You can do that on your phone or on your laptop, whatever gizmo you're using, and then enter this code 98304096, and you should be able to join us. So let's have a go at doing this, and let me ask the first question, which is, tell us your name. Let's see who we've got on here, and I'll give you a few moments just to type a few names in here. Wow, this is terrific. Plenty of names. If we get duplicates, we'll see which is our most popular name, because it'll get a bit bigger. I don't think we've got one of those yet. Fantastic. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. It's Mark. We have more than one Mark. The Marks are winning. We have a Mark in the room here. Chloe now has taken the lead. And Sam, we have a number of Sams here as well. Right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And our next question. Where in the UK are you? Where are you today? Or are you not in the UK and further afield? There's plenty of people in London. South London's doing well. London's doing well. People in London could have been more creative than that, I'm sure. Well done, Brighton. Lots of people down there. Maybe I should mention some minorities. Barnsley's on there. I'm from Barnsley, so that's worth a mention. All over the country. There's no difficult Welsh names yet, which I'm slightly, I was anxious about, but we've not got any of those. Lincoln, Loughborough, Hull. Great, everybody is most welcome. Next question then. What's your choice of drink to get you through today? What's your choice of drink? Coffee. This is going to be a dead hit run between the tea and the coffee people. That's pretty good. Tea, coffee, water. Yeah, there's no wine yet. Somebody said wine. Come on. Who's on the wine? Really? That's very good. Yorkshire tea. That's definitely my favorite. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's been your go-to tune to get you through last year? You have to think a bit longer for this. Let's see what we get. We can't stick on Reach by S Club 7. These are very pertinent. Okay, one more. I'm going to give you a countdown again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this question, if you could be famous for the day, who would you be? Oprah. Very good. Marcus Rashford, yay. There's a football theme. We'll put Tim Bissett. That's a terrific answer. That's somebody in this room currying favour. It's not going to work. Brilliant. Is there a football event on at the moment that's affecting this? I'm not certain. Thank you, Boris, for that contribution. I don't recognise all the names. Judi Dench. Tony Benn. This is great. Geraint Thomas. Excellent. Thank you very much. They're still coming in. This is a favourite. I'm going to give you another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we'll move on. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and oh, it stopped on me. Look at that. That's good. We're done. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. That was great fun. Nice to see people on the call, and thank you for taking part in that. Just before we get on to Louise, I'm just going to take you through the little story about what we've been doing in the Frontline Network recently, and some of the things that you can look out for in the future. So the Frontline Network is about supporting you. We support staff from the public, statutory, voluntary sectors right across the UK, working on the front line directly with people experiencing homelessness. What we do within that is we provide funding, and I'll talk something about our funding opportunities in a moment. Get your pen out so you can write those down in preparation. We bring people together in community so that they can share good practice and share from one another. It's about learning and listening. It's not really about just kind of having the experts here. We share and we learn from one another. And then finally, it's about any other resources that we've got, things that you might find useful in your work. We provide those resources often on our website, but we've got other tools and kits that you can use, which we trust that you will find really, really helpful. And we're always listening, as I say, and looking for things that we can do to provide. We flex our funding based on what frontline workers say to us, and we try and change things when we can. So what we're doing is entirely useful and appropriate when it can be. To give you a little bit of a flavour about what we were up to last year, people will have seen our emergency, I can't say that word, our emergency response through our grant making. The Vickers Relief Fund became an emergency fund. We did that through putting a survey out and listening to frontline workers about what would be useful. We designed the whole fund based on those both those results. We used that information to help us fund it, and we went out to our supporters to fund that activity. And what we found was that we were able to supply grants for basic essential needs, for overcoming barriers to support, so buying laptops and mobile phones and tablets and all those things that people needed to support people when they were locked down and isolated, and to secure accommodation. So we provided a lot of grants to get people into accommodation, doing that as quickly as we can. And what was different about this particular grant scheme is that they weren't separate categories. We were able to provide from each category so that we could move quickly and get people into accommodation. Just to give you some clue, we spent about 1.6 million in 90 days during the first part of the pandemic, and then we repeated that again over the winter period from November through till April, and really we're able to kind of step up and provide as much support as we possibly can. We've continued as well to provide our online events. We've been unable to do these in person. Normally we would have events and gatherings right up and down the country, but we've managed to keep a good flow of webinars, information sessions, mini online conferences, all over, hosted by different people up and down the country. We've looked at things like youth homelessness, housing first. If you look on the website, there's a whole kind of network of those things there. Our local networks, well, locally they've been really busy. We have been able to launch the Frontline Network in Wales with Cymorth Cymru. We've seen the establishment of networks such as the Pan-London Migrant Frontline Network that's facilitated by Praxis, and they've hosted some really quite brilliant events focusing on migrant homelessness across the UK. We've not been able to keep up all our small funds. So obviously we closed our shadowing fund, which pays for frontline workers to visit other services. That seemed somewhat inappropriate during the pandemic. We hope it'll be back soon. But we did maintain our training fund, and we've been able to provide grants for people to undertake training. Much of that's been online, but that fund remains open and you can make applications through the website as well. We've also been developing some new strategic funding opportunities, and we are later this month, early next month, going to announce a new core funding offer. We'll be looking for five or so charities up and down the country where we'll be able to provide core funding for those organisations. If you keep in touch, we'll put out a piece registering support for that fairly soon. So as I say, register online for the network. If you've not done that already, please do. It's really worth joining. You don't have to register to access the VRF and our grants, but it kind of is nice if you do. It kind of completes the picture if you do register. And we are just as well about to launch our annual Frontline Worker Survey. Our 2020 survey was completed in November of 2020. It's going to be published in the next week or so, and we'll send that out to everybody who is registered and part of the network. This is our listening exercise when we ask frontline workers really to tell us what they are feeling, what they're seeing, and their observations about supporting people right across the UK. We had 930 responses to that, 50 questions exploring those key issues of access to accommodation, access to support services, frontline well-being for frontline workers, and the impact of COVID-19. And this issue of overcoming barriers to support came through very strongly, and I think it's why we focused the conference on that today. So what you've told us, well, it's been a joy to see how people pull together. I wish it was like this all the time. These are the positive messages. At the peak of the pandemic, the local authority was allowing the everyone in scheme, which meant we got a high number of no recourse public fund clients into accommodation, which was a positive step forward. You know, positive messages that we heard coming from right across the UK. Lots and lots of really good things as well. But of course, you know, that wasn't the entire response as well. We asked if you'd seen increased commitment from your national government to preventing and relieving homelessness during the pandemic. And it was kind of a varied response to that. You'll see the responses that, that we've got there. A number of frontline workers did kind of recognise this increased commitment in Wales and how that perhaps compared to Northern Ireland. So good messages coming out from Wales there. And as frontline workers, you told us how the COVID-19 pandemic had heightened and reshaped need when it comes to homelessness, and you described a number of barriers that people were seeing. So, of course, there was an increase in caseload. Many people found it difficult to access accommodation, and people found it harder to access support, particularly around mental health issues. And we detailed some of the findings, and we get kind of under the hood within the main report of some of these observations. And then on top of that, when we asked you about your own well-being, 68% of people felt that your well-being was negatively impacting on your role. Specific issues included feeling healthy and safe, not having enough time to do your role, adapting to remote working, and issues around job security. And we did see that coming through. There were, however, some positive improvements in terms of organisational support. It was good to see organisations supporting frontline workers. A slightly higher proportion of you supported that your organisation had got an employee support service, encourages good reflective practice, and a big increase in employers allowing people to work more flexibly and work flexible hours. And so what we've done within this report is we have made a number of recommendations, and we've begun to play those, and we'll be playing out those recommendations over the coming weeks and months. A taster of what some of those say is a recommendation around increasing and sustaining local housing allowance rates, so that we can ensure that housing benefit and usual credit housing payments support people more to access accommodation. We're recommending expanding capacity in services, in particular mental health support services, to avoid long waiting times for people experiencing homelessness. And we're also recommending asking employers to value frontline staff through job security, as well as other benefits such as things around pay, annual leave, and flexible working. So really strong set of findings. We're going to play those out and promote those across all 4 nations and all 4 governments during July. So next week is the kind of official launch of that report on the 1st of July. We'll be sharing that report. We ask that people share that as much as possible and get it round wherever they can. And we look forward to your feedback, and also getting ready to participate in the new survey, which will hit your inbox in the autumn. Great. So thank you for that. If you've got any questions, do just stick them in the chat, and the team here will pick those up and we'll try and answer them during the day. Any observations or anything that you'd like to hear more about, just let us know. So now I'm really thrilled that we have Louise Casey with us. Louise, do I have to stop sharing my screen now, team? Aha, good. Did that work? Yes. We're slick on the tech, can you tell? Louise, I'm very pleased that you're here with us today. And Louise is going to spend a few minutes talking to us about our experience and talking to the network and we'll take questions and we'll hopefully be able to chat at the end. Good morning, Louise, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Tim. And as odd as it still is, talking into a screen 15 months later, I'm really, really pleased that Tim and Amanda asked me to come along this morning, and I'm really, really pleased that I'm here. I think one of the things that throughout my career, both as paid and unpaid worker, that I think that the kind of role really of frontline workers is often not, let me just change my screen, that it's not as understood really. I think a lot of people that come in at management level or otherwise don't always understand the pressures, I think, both on volunteers but also on paid staff that carry an additional burden, really. Not a burden, that's the wrong way of putting it, but a different role. So I also think that the missed opportunity quite often for people doing policy or strategy, or in government and in local government and in think tanks and in some of the large charities, is that there is just such a disconnect between the kind of lobbying and campaigning and actually some of the reality of what frontline workers are actually having to deal with day in, day out, which I'll come to in a moment. And one of the reasons I admire St. Martin's in the Fields so much, and have done over a very long time now, is because, and Tim epitomised that earlier when he was talking, with their kind of humble approach to just trying to find the right way to get the most simple and straightforward solutions for people, and knowing that throughout this period we are gathering people who will have rent arrears, and knowing that that's going to be like the Hoover Dam removed, and the gushing of that into the system, that actually really simple things like clearing people's arrears or doing rent and deposit in advance, and all of those things just don't seem to be present in many both government and local government strategies and policies. And yet that's the sort of thing that if you're a frontline worker trying to actually work out how you can get somebody out of homelessness and at least into an assured short hold tenancy, you can't do that if you've got rent arrears, and you can't do that if you haven't got enough money for rent and deposit in advance. Sorry, I just reject that, that was embarrassing. Right, so listen, what I wanted to do before I did anything else is I just wanted to basically cast really what I think the last 12 months have been about, and not just to concentrate on homelessness and everyone in. So for me, there are kind of three big things that I think have happened in the last 12 months and that will continue to build. The first is obviously COVID and the pandemic, that essentially COVID and the pandemic in many ways has just shown where the spotlights are on the fragility and the fractures in our system. So for all of us on this call today, most people knew that there were actually thousands of people that were either on the streets or near the streets, and actually, and some in fact who were unable to access any support or help because they had no recourse to public funds, that actually it came as no surprise, I think, to many people last year, that in terms of getting everybody in, it wasn't just the sort of 5,000 in the street count, it was a further 3,000 of people that were in communal night shelters, communal church halls and community halls with mattresses on the floor, through to then the sort of thousands of people that were coming onto the streets or near the streets. And I think it got to something like 29,000–30,000 by September, October. So, and there were great things about the pandemic, actually, with everybody working together. Very struck by some of the comments that, certainly I was involved in that initiative and I just didn't take no for an answer. And we just pushed on and on and on to make sure that we got as many people off the streets, and went from somebody in London, the mayor's office, saying to me, well, we've got a travel lodge that we have got at the weekend. And I went, well, that's great, mate, but I need a lot more than 120,000 beds. I think we need something like 5,000 in London. So we need to go bigger here. The second aspect, which I think is much not thought about, and actually I think it's fantastic that we've got people from all corners of the United Kingdom here today, is devolution. And I think one of the really interesting things that isn't an issue right now, but will become an issue, is actually a real awareness in all 4 nations of the United Kingdom of their independence. So actually, Mark Drayford can decide when the borders open or don't open. He can decide when the pubs open or don't open. Nicola Sturgeon can do the same thing, and in a different kind of way, so can Northern Ireland and so can England. So I think it's the first time that in general consciousness, no matter what we all think, and the fact that we are all represented here today in different four nations, and how fantastic that is. And actually, I've also seen the work that happens in those 4 nations during the pandemic. I think in terms of public consciousness and in terms of policy consciousness in government, that has been a first. And I think that that's quite interesting from many perspectives. And I also think, just to be slightly controversial for a moment, that the population of Yorkshire is bigger than the population of Scotland. So that's a lot bigger than the population of Wales and of Northern Ireland. And I think what we'll see as time goes on is a recognition really of what does devolution mean for areas in England, where actually they have very significant levels of population, greater in many ways than some of our principalities. So I think that's one of the things which I don't think will bed in. It doesn't affect the day-to-day lives of many people right now in terms of our work, but I think has affected the consciousness of the nation. And then my third one, and I think this is a really integral and important one, particularly because we know in the work of homelessness that people who are from disadvantaged and challenging backgrounds are disproportionately represented in the homeless population, certainly in the United Kingdom, but also globally in other global north countries, that actually the Black Lives Matter as a strapline for actually the need really, and the greater depth of understanding that actually that voice was struggling to be heard and now is heard better, but we are a long way off any form of racial equality in our institutions and are in the ways that many of us have operated for many, many decades. And I think that also strikes to me to the growing, so many corporates, for example, nowadays talk about ESG, which is the environment, social injustice and inequality, and then governance. And actually what many of them are struggling with, and I think that typifies all institutions in the country, is what social equality looks like. And I think the heightened awareness of that and some of the work on that is going to be absolutely vital. We shouldn't forget it. And I think those 3 things all started to get much greater visibility during 2020 and in 2021, and we need to continue with that out the other side. Now, I always wish first of all, I could say that things are going to get better, and I think things will change, and in some ways have to get better because of what I'm about to talk to you about. So the thing about working in social welfare and social policy is that quite a lot of the time, what you're doing is trying to raise consciousness and awareness around a subset of the population who often through no fault of their own have been born into a different life to, say, the Prime Minister, who was born into a life where he went to Eton and off he went. And basically the divide really between the rich and the poor, the divide in terms of all forms of equity, and that what we often end up doing is saying, look, these are people who are homeless, or these are families that can't feed their kids, or these elderly people that actually never had enough money to support themselves in their pension because they were always in low paid and non-pensionable jobs. These are the cohorts which as a community we need to look after. And you can come to that through kind of different ideologies. On the right, that is often that you should help people less fortunate than yourself. That's a very Cameron and May belief. So certainly both of them are very believe that you should always support people less fortunate than yourself, that actually a barometer of a society is how you treat the poor. Whether their policies match that is up for people to decide, but that was the ideology. Whereas on the left, people like Gordon Brown and Tony Blair would come at this as an equalities issue, that, you know, the education, that by uplifting educational standards and therefore attainment of all of society, and particularly those that didn't have that equality, you essentially move people out of poverty using an equalities agenda. But a lot of the time we're talking about a subset of the population. So I know Tim and I don't look it, but believe it or not, we were around a long time ago when in London there was a place called the Bullring, and the Bullring was underneath Waterloo Bridge. It's now the IMAX cinema. And it was an iconic area in homelessness, because underneath there, and this is very similar to, say, Chicago now, actually, where they have a similar population, there were vast encampments of homeless people who you know, sort of were in structures underneath the bridge and underneath that area. And actually, at one point, there were over 400 people in those encampments and structures. And when TB, when tuberculosis hit the homeless population, it went through the Bullring like wildfire. But the point I'm making is that was a subset of the population. Most people don't think they will ever have TB. It's not something that occurs to them. It's something they read about in the books around the, you know, around a millennium ago. It's not something they consider is theirs. The fundamental difference about COVID-19, of course, is that it has affected all of the population globally. And the second thing is, it has shown that some of us are in boats that sink in this storm, or on rafts that sink in this storm, and some of us are on boats that will sail into the sunset through the storm. So when the storm passes of the pandemic, some will be in boats that are fine, and some will be in boats that have sunk. And that's where the statistics, and I'm using these in various forms, just show that the numbers of people now affected socially and economically, particularly economically, by the pandemic are so huge. So to put this into perspective, and remember now, I'm used to having to kind of get my head around prime ministers and chancellor of the exchequers and what would make them think about what they might want to do. So between March and October last year, 400,000 people were made redundant in that 6-month period alone. That is more than during the whole of the last financial crash and recession of 2008, 2009. So that's 400. Unemployment is at 1.61 million as of April 2021. That's a huge uplift. So if you add 400,000 to 1.6 million, that gets me to 2 million. Millions are currently furloughed, and Tim and I were talking about this just before we came online, about the enormous effect that both the evictions moratorium and the end of furlough is going to have on the people that you are, if you're not supporting now, you might be supporting them soon. So 3.4 million people are currently furloughed. So that gets me so far to 5.4 million. 5.4 million doesn't really get a Chancellor of the Exchequer too worried. That's not a big enough figure. Population census 2020, 2011, you know, at 66 million, 5.4 million. You know, we've got a system that's protecting those people. If they need help, they can get it, etc., etc. But if you start adding these figures up, there's a further 3 million that the National Audit Office, these are no campaigning body, this is no campaigning organisation, this is the National Audit Office, identified as being excluded from financial support. And a lot of those people are really close to, do they have £5,000 in savings? Have they spent that out now? What will they be able to do? That gets me to 8.4. The number of people on universal credit doubled from 3 to 6 million in this period. I mean, that's unheard of in post-war Britain, to double the number of people on welfare benefits in such a short period is quite remarkable. So that now adds 6 million to that. That gets me to 14.4 million. Now a hair or two is starting to be moved on the Chancellor's head, because basically that's a big number out of 66 million. And so if you add to that the 2 million people that people often do not talk about, and I don't think journalists even understand that this exists, is we have 2 million people on what's called legacy benefits who saw incidentally no uplift whatsoever during the pandemic. So I know people are worrying about those that went on universal credit with what's called the extra £20, and that they will have the shock of their lives when that's removed later this year, which at the moment that is the plan. You know, there are people, 2 million of them, on legacy benefits, which is around sickness and others, but also those that just haven't moved over to universal credit. That, ladies and gentlemen, gets me to 16.4 million people. That's close to 25%, you know, it's 20 to 25% of the population. Two things here. One is the country can't ignore that. That won't go away, and the impact of that will be felt for a long time. And secondly, it will have a huge impact on not just homelessness, but actually all forms of social welfare. I've been doing two things in the last 15 months. I've reconcentrated some of my effort on homelessness around everyone in particular last year, and then I moved across to have a kind of go at trying to work out how we could, just for the moment anyway, improve how food banks, certainly in London, were operating. I think one of the best things that could come out of all of this is we ended the need for food banks. They are the sticking plaster of sticking plasters, and we can make it a plaster cast rather than a sticking plaster, but that's what it is. So we're in tricky territory, and I think we're in tricky territory in terms of government policy and changes. And I think a lot of people working in the social welfare side will think things like, well, why in God's name would you take away that £20 uplift? And I, you know, sitting on lobbying calls saying, well, you know, 74% of the public supported that £20 uplift in January. That's a first. Normally the public do not support increases in welfare benefits. Remember, our welfare benefits now, you know, if you're a couple without children, that's £8 a day. And some of the welfare benefit levels are as low as they were in 1990. And so for those of us working on the front line, and those of us working in roles where they gather that information and try and do something about it, it must just be beyond frustrating for you. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to get to Thursday and to know that somebody's coming out of prison and has nowhere to go, or that somebody's built up, you know, rent arrears because of the pandemic, that somebody is essentially having to leave home because of domestic violence, or because, you know, of their falling out the sort of pressure pot of all living in cramped conditions, and so on and so forth. And it's really hard then to know that that pain, really, those shouts of pain, are essentially falling on what may appear, and certainly for me sometimes, deaf ears in terms of the government. But I suppose what I wanted to say is, I think that we are at the beginning of a longer climb. I don't think that we all reacted, the country pulled together. We're more sympathetic at the moment to people less fortunate than ourselves. That's what the polling shows. It's not going to be easily predictable to see when the restrictions end and when work starts to become available again. I just think those figures are too big that I talked about. The dent in those families and those communities is too great. And I think partly the reason why when Tim and Amanda approached me, particularly about this particular conference or day, is because fundamentally the burden of that, the work needed, will be felt on the front line first and foremost. And when I was the homelessness czar, when I was the crime czar, when I was the troubled families czar, I spent each week I would spend time out on shifts and directly with frontline workers and directly with clients, because it's the only way that you can really understand what is going on, and you can really understand what some of the simple solutions are, because sometimes the system makes the solutions really complicated. So actually giving a low-income family a small freezer, if they've got, you know, property to put that small freezer in, that reduces their waste by 45%. Most importantly for me, it reduces their household food bill by 35%. The same way, Tim being able to actually write off an individual's debt or get to them when they come out of prison means that they won't end up homeless. So I feel very optimistic that the level of change going on is so great that some of these issues can't be ignored. But I wanted, I guess, if you'll take it from me, I wanted to thank you really for the phenomenal work that you do, and the fact that we've got everybody from all areas of our country here today is just so heartening, actually, and that we are always stronger together. We are always stronger when actually we have stories, anecdotes, facts, fiction and data analysis across the whole country, and not just from one particular area of the country. And that comparing and contrasting, even if you look at who brought down the numbers, where it was most effective between England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, there were differences in some of the approaches and differences in some of the successes around that. That's all helpful in terms of going forward. So listen, I've talked for slightly more than I was supposed to, and I've only allowed, I'm sorry, Tim, 10, whatever your schedule is, I'm okay for time, but I know that we've only got till 10:50 according to your schedule. But my thing here is, having started out as a volunteer under a Thatcher and then Major era, as in political masters, and now despite my hair, I'm slightly older than I probably should be, but 30 years later, I think that we're facing an even greater hill to climb. And I think COVID hasn't created that hill, but it's shone the spotlight on it, and the cavernous gap really between the rich and the poor is greater as we come out into 2021. And I think we're looking at, you know, a long time before we're through any of this. And austerity in local government, austerity in the government's agenda is not going to go away. If you look at the next 3 years of this Conservative government, they have a huge majority. They're not going to necessarily easily make the changes that many people on this call might want to have changed. And I think even if you look at the next election, you know, one was looking at a crystal ball, the odds would be on a Conservative government. So we have to make sure that we're able to speak apolitically. That's why I accepted a crossbench peerage, not a political peerage, because it wouldn't be right for somebody like me. I have to be able to do what I can despite who's in Downing Street or because of who's in Downing Street. But look, I've talked for too long, Tim, I apologise. I just admire so much, really, some of the people that I met last year and continue to meet in the course of my work in food banks and in homelessness. And if it means anything, I admire you greatly, and I'm so glad that you get up every day and keep doing it. I wish I could say it's going to get easier, guys, but it ain't. So that's why Tim's network, that's why some of the support that the Frontline network offers is so valuable. And it's a sign of strength to take that support. That's a sign of strength. We've got a rough couple of years, if not more, ahead of us, guys. Take support if it's offered. And most importantly, look after yourselves and look after each other. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Louise. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Can I just go back to your final comments there? You know, I think I share your optimism about the good things that have happened over the last year, but I share your anxiety and your concerns about the next, and I don't know what the time scale for that is, the next 12 months, 2 years, three years. And I know that you've worked on the front line. What do you think people should be doing really to prepare for the next 2 years and equipping themselves to deal with what is going to be, a pool of 16.4 million coming to frontline workers for the kind of support that we offer?
So I think one of the things which we often don't do, Tim, is almost when things get more difficult, embarrassment about self-care gets greater simultaneously. So more when you're, and I'm 56 years of age, I've been around a long time and I've made a lot of mistakes and I've got a lot of stuff wrong, right? And one of the things I got wrong, and I probably continue to get wrong, is first of all, I think the harder I work, the more I can achieve.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just work and work and work, and I don't think, what is the 3 things I can do today that will do something, that will actually get something over the line? Or do I just flog myself to death in order to get everything over the line? And so I think sometimes stepping back, even if you're, a hostel worker, or you're, the modern expression, I believe, is well-being and self-care.
Yeah.
I would say sometimes when you're working directly with people and you know that you're so lucky because you do have an income coming in, and most of us, God willing, have somewhere to live, when you're working with people. And the other thing, the really interesting thing, and I think this I know we collect this in London, but I think we would find this across the country, is the thing I said to Genric at the end of 2019 is, it's not just your numbers, mate, that are going in the wrong direction. It's this huge cohort of people that have been out for more than 2 years that have really significant drug, alcohol, and mental health problems. And that's the change, I think, after a decade of austerity. And I think workers find that deeply, deeply frustrating, because actually just putting a roof over someone's head or getting them into, a communal setting of a night so they can sleep on the floor just is beyond, when you know what they're dealing with. Can be traumatic childhood abuse, it can be PTSD coming out of the armed forces, and so the mismatch. And what I think the most important thing that people do, in a way, and this is odd for me because I'm quite tough and I've got a reputation of being a bit tough, is actually looking after each other and looking after themselves, and knowing the limitations of where we are is going to be really important, Tim, more important than ever before.
I completely agree. I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question. We're just about out of time, but it's come from the chat. And someone's asked that it's important that decision makers spend time with frontline workers. And often they just kind of turn up on organised visits and say, you're all doing terribly well. I'm just interested to know what your thoughts might be. How can we get a genuine link between what the experience of frontline workers is? They're often the first to see how changing policy impact on the ground. How do we create that bridge between them and decision makers so that information flow can be really effective?
So that's a really good question. I think we come full circle to that one again, actually, is that all credit at this point should go to a woman called Julia Unwin. Julia Unwin ran something called, I think, West End Community Services, and it turned into Homeless Link, or Homeless Network, that then turned into Homeless Link. Anyway, yeah. Julia schooled a whole group of us in the art of how to lobby for the First Rough Sleepers initiative, which actually was under John Major, it was Sir George Young. And I think the thing here is to box clever. So if officials aren't prepared to come out, reach out to your local councillor, so you're in local government world, so you're back in Barnsley, reach out to whoever the lead member for housing is. They find it very hard to say no because they're politicians. And then if you have sympathetic officials at any level, ask them out, ask them out on the street and make it not too hard for them. Because I think sometimes people go the other extreme and essentially criticize the hell out of somebody when they've got them on the street. And that doesn't work either. It just puts their backs up. They feel like they're failing. And none of us, no matter who you are, wants to feel like you're failing. You may not know that you're achieving everything that you want to achieve. That's a different thing to saying that you're failing. They're two very different things. And I think sometimes the sector just has a go and having a go puts people's backs up because they are actually trying their best. Particularly officials, remember, have to march on the orders of democracy and the politicians. Yeah. So I think that's really, really important. And I think sometimes just getting an hour with somebody so they can see it for themselves, not being overly protective about who they meet, you know, letting them see it. It's like, actually, yes, some people don't want to come in. They're an absolute pain. They are really difficult. Yeah. And we know why. And we've had some time to work that one out. But you know, the warts and all is the other thing, Tim, which, sorry, is like small solutions. So, you know, you know, I find it really interesting that St. Martin's, which I know you're, you know, a big charity, but you're not a multi-million-pound charity, far from it. Yet you're providing the absolute gold dust in government policy. So I said to them when they did their last Rough Sleepers initiative for England, where's your rent and deposit? It's like, where is it? And they said, that's all covered because of the new Great Prevention of Homelessness Act. And I was like, well, that ain't going to work. And look what you said in your opening thing. And all of the people on this call will be knowing there are small solutions, and officials love small solutions.
Well, we'll try and gather all that reconnaissance and play them into officials as best as we can. And to anybody who'll listen, that's what we're kind of all about. We are completely out of time. There's people doing that in the background. So that means we have to stop talking. Thank you, Louise, so much for giving so much time.
Good luck with the rest of the day. And the people watching, do just try and enjoy it a little bit, guys. You know, take the piss out of Tim. He's good for it.
It happens all the time. I'm used to it.
He wears those. He doesn't actually need those glasses. Did you know that? He just has them for show. So, you know.
How wrong is that? Louise, from saying thank you, I'm now keen to get rid of you. That's Thank you so much for your time this morning. We'll see folk later. Our next session starts at 11. Sign up to the network. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.